Good evening, Senator Minor.
Good evening, Madam President. Let me say before I start that I had the good fortune to meet Senator Winfield a number of years ago. I think it might have been in a Finance Committee meeting, and we sat and we talked for quite some time. And since that evening, I think we have built a fairly strong relationship, and I have always gotten the sense that even if I don't agree with the pathway, I accept 100% his strong will and interest in trying to make people's lives better. I wish I felt that way about 2004, and I want to explain my concerns. I think that all of us here in the circle accept the fact that what we see and what we feel is not always the same in the printed word. And I think part of what we're all trying to deal with is not only the population that Senator Winfield is trying to help, because I think in all of our lives we have perhaps either seen personally, felt personally, the same unfairness or witnessed the same unfairness that he's concerned about. But I think we're also hearing and feeling from our constituents a real concern about the words that are in this bill and how they may be interpreted. And so let me start with a section which is section 12, I think, which may have given rise to many people in law enforcement being concerned about what the change in qualified immunity might mean. And I might suggest that to the average individual, when the state is suggesting that they're going to form a task force to study, to evaluate the merits and feasibility of requiring police officers to procure for the first time ever, professional liability insurance, I think they might believe that there's a significant enough change in these pages contemplated where their personal liability is going to be affected. Further, if you go in that same section, merits and feasibility of requiring municipality to maintain professional liability insurance, I think they may feel the same way, that as the body is deliberating this language, they can see far enough down the road where there would be quite possibly a need to procure a different insurance than they are currently carrying. And that gives rise to a whole bunch of questions, which I think some have already referred to here about increased cost. What is this going to cost the taxpayer? When I think about the unintended consequences of what we do on occasion, I think of destabilization of the norm. Now, some people may want to destabilize how law enforcement impacts their constituents. They may feel so concerned about history and about even the present day ramifications that it needs to be shaken up that dramatically. When I think about the Northwest Corner, I think about mutual aid agreements, and I think about a town like Litchfield that has both a resident trooper and a constabulary, and I think we have always had mutual aid agreements with adjoining municipalities where our individuals have gone in response to a mutual aid request for, could be an auto accident, could be some kind of a serious altercation. Is a chief elected official going to want to continue that agreement, knowing that the liability now is going to go to a population that, in an adjoining community, that is not going to pay for the ramifications? is the officer going to want to go and respond there because they may be wrapped up in some kind of a claim that they had no intention of ever getting involved in, yet they're part of what I'll call the lawyerly roundup of everyone that's in the room, and then we'll let people out later, but at least initially they're all going to be part of the same legal ramifications, the claim against the municipality, the claim against the law enforcement individual. So what I have heard from people is that this is quite possibly going to change those types of relationships, and that's why I speak of destabilization, not because it is the intent to break down law enforcement necessarily, but because of some of the changes in legal standing, how officers may be treated in the future as a result of this language, that they may choose just to avoid that situation. So it's not whether that was our intent, it's not whether there's a direct line word in this bill that says you will be. There is certainly enough language in the bill to say that you could be, and I think that's what people in some cases, at least that expressed a concern to me, are concerned about, both at the municipal level and police men and women. Language as it pertains to the use of excessive force. There's been a lot of discussion this evening about chokeholds. I've had conversations with female troopers and police officers that I would argue are considerably smaller than I am, that are feeling that they are more likely to be put at greater risk as we begin to pull the tools back. And so I heard the exchange between Senator Champagne and the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and I think he asked the question, if the use of a chokehold was to make safe a third party, would that rise to the level where a claim could be brought or a disciplinary action could be brought? And frankly, I wasn't sure of the answer. So if I could, through you, Madam President, in the case of a smaller female officer attempting to subdue someone who had someone else in a chokehold, so removing that perpetrator from a third party, would the officer or trooper come under any legal scrutiny or civil penalty as a result of the passage of this bill? Through you.
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. First, let me thank the good senator for his kind words. As it relates to the question at hand, what I said earlier was that as the bill is constructed, if someone, in this case the female officer, applied a chokehold or neck restraint in a way that was not in response to that imminent threat as it's described here, then they would have run afoul of the law as it would have passed. And I will just add to that in my conversations with police, one of the things that made me comfortable with placing this into the bill was that it was represented to me that many of their departments have a outright ban on this type of usage, as it sits currently. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President, and I thank the gentleman for his answers. So, as I described it, and as it was asked of me by the trooper, the answer is yes, that they would be, in that circumstance, in some legal jeopardy if that policy was not in place already within their own agency or their department. And so I do thank you for your answer. I noticed in Section 43, which deals with the Department of Corrections, that there's an obligation to actually intercede And the Department of Corrections, oddly enough, I've always had kind of a special place in my heart for people that work there. And maybe my experience with them is not the same as everyone else's. But I couldn't imagine taking an oath to do a job to go into a building where you can't get out and they can't get out. And you don't really have anything to defend yourself. Yet you are quite possibly in the same vicinity as some pretty mean characters. And so I always try to think of whether it is, 20 years and out, or whether they should be eligible for PTSD or counseling, treatment benefits, and so on. Does this language belong here in cases that I think we all could imagine arise in corrections facilities where paid staff are called upon to intervene in an altercation between perhaps 2 or more individuals that are inmates, and yet if someone were to strike, as I read this, one of those inmates in an effort to control the situation, a fellow corrections officer would be required to intervene. Am I correct in my reading of that, in that section, through you, Madam President?
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Madam President, I'm not sure how to answer that because I'm not sure I quite grasp the whole situation. I think you're asking in the case of any usage of a strike, would you be required to report that? I would imagine that there are policies in place that deal with this already, but as it pertains to the law, I guess the question here would be whether the corrections officer knows that, and this would have something to do with their training as well, obviously, but knows that the strike that you're talking about is considered an excessive use of force, or if they know it to be illegal. So I think that something I can't, given the amount of information you've given me, I'm not sure I can answer. But I think it requires the knowledge that the bill intends to be in place before you would have to do the reporting. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
So thank you, Madam President. I thank the gentleman for his response. So again, I'm not an attorney and I'm not law enforcement, but when I read 2 different words, one being excessive, the other being illegal, excessive to my mind might be in the eye of the beholder. Illegal might be something that's defined in statute. This seems to call on the witnesser to intervene and attempt to stop, even for something that in their eyes might be excessive. And I guess I'm wondering how you would ever quell some kind of an uprising in a corrections facility if we limit the ability of corrections officers to control, whether by force, physical force, holding, grabbing, punching, when they are, I would say, normally outnumbered. And sometimes, again, I'll refer back to the trooper that I spoke with. I think we have for quite some time attempted to be blind to the hiring policy so that we have women in corrections facilities as well. And once again, I think they may be at a disadvantage, a physical disadvantage. So I'm trying to imagine how we would ever get anything under control in that kind of a scenario where we're obligating other corrections officers to step in and stop the excessive force. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure that it works that way. So corrections officers have a duty, which also means that they have a duty to control what's going on in the prisons. They are trained on when to use force and when that force is appropriate. And so, as with many things that we talk about, this is somewhat situational. I don't think this bill is written in such a way that it's any use of force that the witnesser would have to report. I think it is in those times when your training kicks in and you know that the person is operating outside of the training. I think what this bill generally is getting at, because we don't have those situations all the time, I think what this bill is generally getting at is the notion that there are times within our prisons where for various reasons, we find that an excessive amount of force is being used, or force is being used in an illegal way, where we find that through many stories, some of which we've heard here, someone goes into the prison and that person finds themselves acted upon in a way that should never have been acted upon. But if the individuals who are in play here, both the actor and the person witnessing it, are finding themselves in a situation where the actor is in line with their training, then even if they're using force in an appropriate way, that doesn't trigger under the bill, through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Minor.
And so, through you, Madam President, as the gentleman described it, there would be a process where someone else would determine whether or not the force being exercised was, in fact, excessive. And then if the individual that didn't intercede, whether that person then would run afoul of the statute for not having interceded. Someone will make a determination whether the force was excessive or not, and then in retrospect, a third party that may have witnessed or may have chosen to let it happen would then be judged on whether or not they properly evaluated the force. Through you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Minor. Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. I would say yes, the statute couldn't be functional without the scenario operating as Senator Minor has indicated it would, through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the gentleman for his response. The other section of the bill that many people have reached out to me about has to do with traffic stops. And I, again, was listening as well as I thought I could to the exchange between the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and Senator Champagne. For some period of time, I used to own a garage, and I could almost promise you that on a Saturday night, once or twice a month, I'd get a phone call to tow a vehicle off of Route 8. And very seldom would it be for a reason other than misuse of plates, unregistered motor vehicle, no driver's license. And on occasion, that would include a follow-up arrest for weapons, drugs, additional warrants. And so I was listening intently to the exchange about what would happen in terms of items that may be found in an automobile, and I think Senator Champagne talked about some jewelry. But I was thinking more about illegal weapons, more about illegal drugs. And so, through you, Madam President, in a case where there was a stop specifically for a motor vehicle violation, which might have been misuse of plates or unregistered motor vehicle, is there any point in time in which the finding of an illegal weapon in the automobile would not arise to the level of an additional charge to the driver upon passage of this, through you, Madam President?
Thank you, Senator. Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm not sure how the scenario is playing out. If you could explain it a little more. So I'm hearing that a gun, for instance, was found in the vehicle. I don't know how the gun was found. I don't know if it was seen on the seat. I don't know enough to actually answer the question, I don't think yet, through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. So a vehicle gets stopped on Route 8. It's determined that that vehicle had no license plate on the back of the car. And so the individual was stopped because there's no plate. Trooper advances to the car, says to the driver, "You know you have no license plate on the back of this car. I need to see your license and your registration." The driver of the automobile hands over his driver's license and a registration that is in the glove box. And the registration is expired, and there's no plate on the car. Is there a next step in which case the trooper would either release the car without inspecting its contents, or would inspect the contents, find, because it has to be towed, there's no plate on it, find a firearm for which the driver has no permit? Does that result in an additional charge to the driver through you, Madam President?
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Madam President, I guess where I'm having trouble is I don't know how the firearm was discovered. I recognize in your scenario it gets discovered at some point. I just don't know how that occurred. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. So, but for this bill, I wouldn't be asking that question, right? And so what I'm having trouble with is trying to understand why we didn't envision that occurring. Why we didn't envision the likelihood that a person on a Saturday night on Route 8, stopped with no plate on the back of the car, might have an illegal firearm in the car. And now the question comes down to, well, what were the circumstances? Now, the people that I represent don't want people stopped for no reason. I can promise you they don't want people stopped because of the color of their skin. But I would bet you as I stand here tonight, they would want to know the answer to my question, which is, before we vote on this bill, what is going to happen to the person that had a firearm in the car when we've gone through all the discussion we've gone through about firearms? What is going to happen? Are we going to turn the car over to the tow truck operator with a gun in it? Is that what we're going to do? So that's what I'm trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out whether under this law, if we pass it, the worst thing that can happen to the driver is that he loses his gun. No charge, no conviction, no history, because it never happened. So is there a scenario through you, Madam President, where there would be a charge through you to the Chairman of the...
Senator Winfield.
Thank you, Madam President. I recognize the Senator is trying to get an answer to his question, and I'm trying to figure out what the scenario actually is. So let me explain why I'm having a hard time. As I understand the scenario, the officer is engaged with the individual in the car. The officer doesn't see a weapon or something to indicate that there's a weapon in the car. There is a issue with the license. There's an issue with the plate. The car gets towed. I don't know how this gun even came into play. So I'm having a difficult time because I don't know how the gun comes into play. And I would love to answer the question. I just don't understand how the gun even came into play in the scenario as presented to me through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. So tonight, this bill is not in effect. October 1st, this bill goes into effect when it comes to consent. So tonight, on Route 8, car gets stopped, driver driver's told that there's no plate on their car. I need to see your license and your registration. The driver hands over the license and the registration. The trooper asks the driver, "Do you mind if I search your car? You seem nervous." And the driver says, "No, I don't want you to search my car." And then the trooper says, "Well, what are you nervous about? You got no reason to be nervous. It's just you got no registration. It's not like you're going to jail for no registration." And the driver consents. And as the trooper searches the car, he finds a handgun under the front seat. "Do you have a permit for that?" "No." "Do you know how it got there?" "No." Under that scenario, through you, Madam President, would the driver be charged with an illegal firearm in the car that he was driving?
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Madam President, I would imagine that's very likely under that scenario. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. And once this bill becomes law on October 1st, is the case the same if it was exactly the same? Through you, Madam President.
Senator Winfield.
Through you, Madam President, well, once this becomes law, the officer wouldn't be asking that question because it wouldn't be allowed. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. I thank the gentleman for his answer. And so, under that scenario where the officer is not allowed to ask the question, the vehicle is going to be towed. Through you, does the... That's all right. Through you, does the illegal firearm, presumed illegal firearm, because as I understand it, under the language of the bill, you wouldn't be able to even ask if you had a permit to carry. So what happens to the firearm? Does the firearm stay in the car when it gets towed to the garage? Through you.
Senator Winfield. Through you, Madam President, again, and I know I may seem obtuse, I'm sorry. But as I understand how the situation is playing out, the officer engages with the individual is now out of the vehicle, the gun has not been discovered and the vehicle is towed. So under that scenario, I guess the answer would be yes, the gun would move with the vehicle, but at no point in that scenario, at least as I understand it, has a gun been discovered at all. So yes, the gun would be moving with the vehicle, I guess is the answer.
Senator Minor.
And thank you, Madam President. And so under the bill, once it becomes law, is it the gentleman's understanding that there would not be an inspection of that vehicle, could not be an inspection of that vehicle, or could be an inspection that might lead to finding something for which a charge can't be brought? Through you, Madam President.
Senator Winfield.
I don't understand it to be the case that there is a permissible search of the vehicle. As I understand it, the scenario that's presented, the individual has a traffic infraction. That's why the vehicle is being towed. That still hasn't triggered a search of the vehicle, as I understand the scenario. So that's how I would respond to that question. Through you, Madam President.
Senator Minor.
Thank you, Madam President. I don't have any more questions for the good gentleman, Chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Madam President, I tried, as I read through this bill, to find enough in it to support that I thought was worth the risk. And as I said at the onset, I've known Senator Winfield for about as long as he's been here, and I consider that a plus. I honestly, truly believe he wants to do the right thing. I honestly, truly believe there are other people associated with this bill that want to do the right thing. I have concerns, some of which I've outlined, I think, already with the Department of Corrections language. I think it is risky. I have concerns with the consent language in a state that struggles with illegal guns, in a state that struggles, especially in urban communities, with gun violence. I struggle with the language in this bill. I think it's going to give people a pass. I think it's going to give people with a pass. I think it's going to give people a pass that regularly move drugs, that regularly travel with firearms. I can tell you in the community that I live in, guns stolen in Litchfield have been a number of times recovered and were known to be used in drive-by shootings and other illegal activities. So this is not somebody else's problem. This is all of our problem. And I want to try and find a solution that helps you and others get to a better place, including how law enforcement views people of color and how people of color view that interaction with law enforcement. Because I think it has been, to some degree, in many places, a problem. I can't get there with this bill. I am very concerned about what the language of this bill is going to do in terms of consent. I think the folks in the state of Connecticut that make a livelihood out of illegal activity are going to see this as an opportunity. I think it's going to increase the level of violence in communities not like mine. I think it's going to increase the level of violence in larger communities. I am concerned about the chilling effect of the language as it pertains to insurance. I don't know why we would be talking about insurance if we didn't anticipate that something here was going to change. I think reasonable people can opine that it's not going to be that bad, that nothing in this language is going to create an additional exposure for police. But if that's the intent, they certainly don't have the feeling. And I can tell you, I've heard from people in the district that I serve that I have never heard from. Never. And I think I listened to Senator Hartley, and she spoke about individuals that were not coming here to work. I've spoken to people who are looking at how many years they have in law enforcement and fear that this is something that's just going to accelerate their exit. So if it is intended to get at the bad apples, I think this is having an effect on all the apples, not only just the bad one. And I'm not saying it says it. I'm not saying you can point to the words and say this is what the drafter intended. I'm suggesting that when you put all the words together, this is the feeling that people get. I'm also concerned that when it comes to excessive use of force, not that I, or many of the people that all of the people that I've spoken to about what happened to Mr. Floyd, no one felt that was right. It's those other means of controlling a situation, far less than that, that I think people are worried about, and they don't know where they're going to fall through that process. So thank you, Madam President. Again, I thank the gentleman for his work, and while I don't agree that this is the solution, I do understand wholeheartedly your interest in trying to make the state better. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Minor. Will you remark further on